Donald Trump is the king of the MAGA movement. There is no doubt about that. Or is there? Actually, according to a new New York Times article by writer Ezra Klein, it turns out that Donald Trump may not actually be the king of MAGA anymore, as his base, the MAGA movement, seems to be trying to almost distance themselves from him. And we have seen that a lot recently. A lot of stories I have talked about over the last few months. MAGA was pissed off that he picked J.D. Vance, and that is important. That will come back in just a moment. They're angry that he is now selling them commemorative coins for $100 a piece instead of being out there campaigning. They were mad when he attacked Taylor Swift. They're mad that he's attacked Kamala Harris's race. They have repeatedly told him, lay off the personal attacks. Talk about policy, which he's so much worse on. But they were pissed off when he lied about his knowledge of Project 2025. And I bring all of those up because those are all things that I have pointed out. I've talked about those. MAGA revolts. MAGA goes against him. MAGA is mad at him. So the MAGA movement has increasingly, over the last 2 months, been willing to stand up to him and tell him to shut the hell up, basically. They're mad at him for his support of the Florida abortion bill, which he may or may not on any given day support. They're mad at him about everything, it seems. And according to Ezra Klein, it could be because this Frankenstein's monster has just grown out of control and is now turning against its creator. Here is what Klein wrote in his recent New York Times article. Trumpism is whatever Trump says it is, but MAGA is whatever his movement becomes. This is why J.D. Vance has been a political liability to Trump's campaign. Vance represents MAGA as it has evolved. Esoterically ideological, deeply resentful, terminally online, unleavened by Trump's instincts for showmanship and the winds of public sentiment. The MAGA coalition, particularly its elected officials in Washington and Stafford class, has grown beyond Trump. It has more views on more issues than he does. It has absorbed more specific and unusual ideologies than he has. It is more hostile to abortion than he is, or than he wants to appear to be. It is more committed to deregulating health insurance than he is, or than he wants to appear to be. There is a great gap between the MAGA leader who slept with a porn star and the factions in the MAGA movement that want to outlaw pornography, as Roberts proposed on Project 2025's first page. In other words, Donald Trump has a few beliefs. He has a few concepts of plans, but it's really nothing, too big, other than deport 25 million people his first day in office. Other than that, Donald Trump, as Ezra Klein correctly points out, kind of goes with whatever the public kind of says, like, oh, you're in favor of this? Hey, I like this thing too. Oh, you hate this? Guess what? I hate it more. And then if suddenly they love it, he'll be like, I've always loved it. That's a great thing. It's a great thing that we all love, but I love it most dearly. I've talked about it forever. He will change depending on what things need, or more importantly, what he needs for that particular day. The movement itself, on the other hand, doesn't change. They have gotten more extreme. I mean, think about this. As extreme as Donald Trump was when he burst onto the scene in 2016, at that time, we still didn't have a real MAGA movement. We didn't have Moms for Liberty. We weren't sitting here worrying about drag queens reading to children. We didn't have book bans. We didn't have statewide abortion bans. Honestly, we didn't have any of the extreme things that have now come from the MAGA movement. And yes, Trump created it. He is the master of it, but he can no longer control it. And it is a good metaphor, obviously, for the Frankenstein's monster. The only problem is Trump himself is a Frankenstein's monster. So you had the Republican Party that for years and years was getting more extreme and, quite frankly, just dumber. George W. Bush dumbed things down in a way that paved the way for Sarah Palin. Or Christine, I'm not a witch, O'Donnell. Joni Ernst. Palin. I may have already said that. But you get the point. All of these people, I mean, Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan, Louis Gohmert, John Kennedy, senator from Louisiana. All of these people are painfully stupid. In 25 years ago, they would have had no place in the party. They would have said, no, get the hell out. You're a weirdo freak. But George W. Bush dumbed things down so much that it paved the way for the morons. And once the morons took over, it woke up a bunch of morons in the public who said, hey, they're just like me. I'd like to have a beer with George W. Bush. That was the thing, right? Like, I'd like to have a beer with him because we want our drinking buddies to run the country. That's a horrible idea, and I love my drinking buddies. But no, God, they shouldn't be running the country. But it paved the way. And out of that stupidity, the Republican Party created Donald Trump, a man who was able to come along and manipulate the masses. He was their Frankenstein's monster. But the Frankenstein's monster was not content. And instead of wanting a mate, as in the original book, this Frankenstein's monster wanted a cult. So he created the Maga movement, Frankenstein's monster's monster. But now that monster too has grown too out of control for Donald Trump. And that is why they have repeatedly turned against him. That is why they're no longer afraid to voice dissent against this man. And it's not because they're waking up and realizing he's extreme. It's actually worse than that. They're waking up and realizing in their own minds, he's not extreme enough. He's not crazy enough. And don't get me wrong, the guy is crazy. He is mentally incompetent. I believe he is suffering from both psychological and neurological diseases. But for the movement that he created, that's not good enough. Deporting 25 million people in your first couple days in office is not enough. You got to deport 50 million. Handing abortion back to the states is not enough, they say. You've got to institute a nationwide abortion ban, starting at 0 weeks. You've got to do all of these things we tell you to do, and if you do not, we will turn against you. They didn't like J.D. Vance at first. I still think they don't like J.D. Vance. But as Klein points out, Vance is more closely aligned today with what MAGA is today. 8 years ago, totally different story. Back when he was a never-Trump Republican. But times change and J.D. Vance has evolved, as has the MAGA movement. This is who they are now. One of the questions I get most whenever I do a Q&A is, does the MAGA movement survive after Donald Trump is no longer in politics? And I've given the same answer every time, but for those who haven't seen it, let me give you the answer again. And the answer is yes and no. I always said, long before Ezra Klein even thought of writing this piece, the MAGA movement to a degree does survive. Bits and pieces of it survive, but they change. They become unrecognizable. They become more extreme. I do not think they will ever have the numbers that they have under Trump, but what Ezra Klein is saying here is exactly what I've been predicting for 2 years now. So it is a little bit of validation for me, makes me feel better knowing that, hey, I'm not the only one who sees this or thinks it. But what I could not have predicted is that evolution to a much more extreme entity would happen before Trump even left politics. So I don't know how this ends for Donald Trump, but I do know MAGA will continue to evolve. They will continue to get worse, but hopefully they will do so with fewer and fewer numbers as each month passes. Hi, everyone. This here is little Athena. And Athena would like to know why you haven't subscribed to Fair and Balanced yet. So please, don't let Athena down. Subscribe today.